and welcome back to another riveting episode of Pantsuits and Lawsuits, your favorite place to learn about American law and the ongoing legal battles determining the future of our country. I'm Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel.
And I am Arizona Attorney General Kris Mays. It's great to be with you again, Dana.
Great to see you. And always, of course, the first question that I have to ask you is, how's my hair looking?
It's fabulous, as always, Dana.
That's all that really matters.
Yes, but it does, unfortunately, on a video podcast. So, as we always find out from comments. But I am glad to see you and your fabulous hair. And we're going to be talking about a very serious subject that I think you and I and all of the AGs across the country care about, which is we're going to be doing a deep dive into an agency that has been historically an incredibly important partner to AGs, to local law enforcement and state law enforcement across the country.
Yeah, we partner with the FBI on countless different types of cases. We have a human trafficking task force. We have an organized retail crime task force. We have a domestic terrorism task force. We have a task force that deals with unsolved murders. I mean, the list goes on, but we rely routinely on these partnerships. And I think something that people don't always know or understand is our authority ends at our state borders. So I only have authority within the state of Michigan. You, I presume, as well, only have authority within the state of Arizona. But there are so many types of criminal activity that are multi-state in nature. And if you don't have the federal government involved and you don't have the FBI and the DOJ working in concert with our states, there's a lot of crime that we're just unable to solve.
No, for sure. And you know, I think people don't appreciate those partnerships, probably because we don't talk about them enough. But here in Arizona, we work closely with the FBI, with the DEA, with HSI, with ATF on a whole host of issues. You know, here in Arizona, because we're a border state, obviously down and have the Mexican border, we work closely with the FBI and the DEA on drug cases, but also on sex trafficking cases. We have something down here called the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF, which helps on national security cases related to the border, but also on election day security issues. And these are close relationships between federal agencies and state government that are really crucial. So, like, what happens at the FBI and the DEA actually matters to our ability to catch bad guys.
Yeah, and the worst feeling in the world is wondering when you see certain things happening at the federal level, can we trust these partnerships anymore? And that is deeply concerning but not for these relationships. Some of our most egregious types of crimes, and the most successful prosecutions would not have happened if we didn't have those relationships. And I think about all the times where we could identify a suspect and we could not execute a search warrant because it's in another state and we don't have that authority to do that. And sometimes I have, by the way, I don't know if you've done the same. I have gone to the state AG and asked for their assistance, but you know what? Sometimes you get it. And sometimes you don't, depending on your relationship. And I will say, I remember very vividly our Boy Scouts of America investigation, Boy Scouts of America being headquartered in Texas. The Texas AG, you may know, doesn't really play nice in the sandbox with the Democratic AGs. And he refused assistance on that case. And, that's hard. You really need the FBI to be working hand in hand with our offices because we're just not nearly as effective otherwise.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had an inverse situation happen where I was asked by the AG of a Republican state, not far from Texas, actually, to help him apprehend a person who was wanted for murder in his state. And of course, I helped with that. That person happened to be in a jail here in Arizona for, I think, something else. And so, obviously, he didn't have to go to the FBI for that. But you make a great point. We need them. We need other federal agencies, and we need their partnership here in Arizona. As I mentioned, we work with the DEA very closely. I actually do most of the DEA's prosecutions for them in Arizona because we do, and I approve about 80% of all of the wiretap investigations here in my state because big drug cases that we do with the DEA. And then end up doing their prosecutions, the prosecutions on those cases. They actually prefer working with me than they do, frankly, with the U.S. Attorney's Office because we are more expeditious and
Yes.
we get stuff done.
Well, and let's be clear about it. There are just certain types of cases where it is not a federal crime, and your typical rapes, robberies, murders are state offenses. And sometimes in order for the feds to charge, they have to find like weird, ways
Yeah,
to approach a case because there just is not any federal law that prohibits whatever that conduct is. And I will give you just an example of the very sort of famous case involving the attempt and the conspiracy to kidnap and assassinate Governor Whitmer here in Michigan. We
right.
worked, hand in hand with the feds, and we had to split the cases up, where ultimately, we took about 8 of the cases that we charged under state law, and then 6 of the cases were charged under federal law because we needed the conduct to fit the law. And in some of these situations, even if the feds would have preferred to go through the U.S. Attorney's Office, which, as you noted, they're often more hesitant to take on those cases, and they want the case to be totally perfect, or
Yeah,
they don't want to move forward. Whereas I find that my department, especially coming from a county prosecutor's office, we're willing to lose cases that we believe in,
right,
even if the evidence isn't perfect.
right.
We're willing to take that chance. And so for those same reasons, as you suggested, sometimes the FBI would rather work with our offices, but for various different reasons. Again, not to disparage the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's offices, but
No.
you know,
But
the
I
other,
think there is a level, and this maybe we're getting too far into the weeds on this point, but there's a level of bureaucracy there that doesn't exist at the state level, I think, and things have to be sent to Washington D.C. all the time. And so, when you're working a drug case, as we do a lot of here in Arizona, you need to move, and that kind of like that bureaucratic layering of approvals can be harmful when you're trying to get a case done. But yeah, I mean it's
yeah.
yeah,
And one last thing to say about that. Candidly, my prosecutors have more experience in the courtroom than a typical assistant U.S. attorney who might try a case every couple of years.
right.
My lawyers, my prosecutors are in the courtroom every
All the
day.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and try cases routinely, and I think that makes a difference sometimes as well.
Yeah, we're in the courtroom all the time prosecuting cases. We are in the state grand jury all the time. And presenting cases to a state grand jury. So, yeah, that's. But anyway, they're really important. I would say one of the things that I've been so concerned about with regard to what's going on at the federal level and the reassignment of agents across agencies from the DEA to the ATF to the FBI is it's taking their focus away from fighting crime. And I've been really vocal down here about that. We found out because we have very good relationships with the DEA that 60 DEA agents had been redeployed to Washington, D.C. to patrol Foggy Bottom and Georgetown and do immigration enforcement and raids, and I guess pick up trash or I don't know what. But 60 DEA agents taken away from the fentanyl, the epicenter of the fentanyl crisis in this country, which is Arizona. More than 50% of all the fentanyl that's been seized in this country over the last 3 years was seized here, Dana, here in Arizona.
Wow.
And our DEA agents were redeployed, not, I believe, not just to Washington, D.C., but to LA, which makes us less safe. And I made that clear. At a press conference, I also made it clear to the head of the DEA, the director of the DEA, who called me, interestingly enough, on a Saturday morning. I was still in bed, actually, because he had heard that I had made those comments. And I just don't find it acceptable that they're doing this with these federal agents.
Yeah. And you're talking about redeploying, these talented, seasoned, experienced agents. What we're also seeing, though, is mass firings of
Yep.
those agents just based on whatever cases they may have handled in the past, or based on their refusal to do things that are frankly illegal. So we see a number of agents getting fired, but we also see a lot of agents just retiring. And in fact,
Yeah.
as soon as Trump came back into office here in the Detroit area, we saw a number of different FBI agents that had been around for a long time or were very high level. And they just suddenly, many of them, if they were eligible for retirement, that was it. They retired. And a lot of others just left and they do private security work for, a business or a company now because they didn't want to be in a position where they felt like they might be forced to do something unethical or even illegal.
Yeah, and I think we saw some of that, and I haven't had a chance to read their lawsuit, but I believe several, and maybe Barb McQuade, who we're going to have on in a second, can speak to this. But several FBI agents have now sued the FBI, or top level FBI personnel for
Mhm.
being fired for the very reasons that you just talked about. And apparently, that lawsuit is quite explosive in terms of what's in it, the details that are in it, and that is just unprecedented. We've never seen anything like the purging that's gone on at the FBI, in the history of this country, which is really alarming to me.
Yeah, it's troubling. And of course, we want to whatever the says is truth. And I think them, of course, in the Charlie Kirk murder case, where he, is sort of spontaneously tweeting or truth socialing, sometimes fraudulent, false information that, of course, the people who are working with him know is not correct. And when you see that time and time again, when you see agencies like the ATF having to say no, that information that's gone out is inaccurate, that is not correct, and they're constantly correcting each other and correcting themselves, it makes you really wonder, like, who's running the show here? And is the point to get truthful information out to the public to help apprehend this suspect? Or is it to create the appearance that you're ahead further in the investigation than you really are?
Yeah, that was weird. I noticed that too. It was weird to see a lot of those major announcements being made at the beginning, certainly in the first 24 hours of the manhunt for the killer, from the president, from Washington D.C. Then Kash Patel came out, and they delayed the press conference to release additional information until he could get there, and then he didn't say anything. I don't know. It was odd, and I think the traditionally, it has been the job of the local field office to do that, and sort of Washington D.C. lets the field office do the work, and it does look a lot. I mean, it'll be interesting to see over time, how what the partnership between the FBI and the local Utah law enforcement officials was like. In this case, it looks like, I mean, obviously Governor Spencer Cox did a lot of the talking, and it looks like the state police there did a lot of the investigation and took control of that. It'd be interesting to see what the FBI, what role the FBI played in this one. I just want to say this about Spencer Cox. Thank God for him. Republican governor of Utah, but someone who immediately came out and said and asked to lower the temperature, and immediately came out and said, put your phones away, don't watch social media, because Russian bots and Chinese bots are trying to divide us, and they're trying to get us to hate each other, and we need to come together at this time. So thank God that he was there and it wasn't somebody else who might have fanned the
Yeah,
flames.
I appreciated that as well. And it's, it's deeply concerning. Obviously you know, the discourse out there, the public dialogue that is so fractured and corrosive, and mean-spirited. And also, I would say, and I'd love to know what your take is on this, Kris. You know, if the plan by some is to make it so that, people like us are so fearful that we're not going to go out and do, the town halls that we've both been doing for a long time, the public appearances we do, the round tables that we like to do. I mean, I think we both believe it's part of our job to interact personally with the public. And, it's terrifying when you think, well, maybe I have to pull back and not do that kind of work because it might be jeopardizing my life, because there's so many people who are out there who see this as a legitimate avenue to use violence in order to quash an opinion that you don't like, or a public office holder that you didn't vote for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, and it is, and again, uh, uh, we have to say over and over again that political violence is never acceptable. I have to say we've been thinking about Charlie Kirk's family. His family is, from Arizona. Turning Point USA, obviously, I don't agree with the organization. I don't agree with pretty much anything that they have said over the years, but it's here in Arizona, and I feel for his family and his wife, Erica. But I think you're also right to point out what is this going to mean for us as a country if politicians feel like they have to retreat, and even people who are quasi politicians like Charlie Kirk was, who was going out there and debating people. But it is going to be, yeah. I mean, I don't intend to stop doing those town halls. I did yesterday. I went to Payson, Arizona, and did a town hall right after this happened. But it does make you think. It's like, well, if am I putting myself in danger, and am I putting the people who come to the town halls in danger as well? Eh,
Yeah, there's that, and I should tell you, I'll just tell you a story, and it involved, obviously, we're both affiliated with the Democratic Attorneys General Association that we refer to as DAGA, and for a time, this is before you were in office, for a time, they used to ask me to help recruit good female candidates for office. But invariably, I would get asked the question when I was talking to somebody that was looking at running, and they'd say, "Well, am I going to be subjecting my family to threats if I do
mm,
this?" And I'd say
mhm.
very honestly, "Oh yeah, all the time. You're going to get threatened constantly. You might get swatted. You
Yeah.
might have people come to your house. You might have people threaten your children." And then invariably, the response to that is like, well, then maybe I'm not going to do this. Anyway, end of story is Daga stopped having me talk to prospective candidates, but I felt like I had to be honest with them. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't right for them not to know what they were walking into. And I guess my question for you is, did you know the level of animosity that would be out there, just for you holding this particular office and having the perspectives that you have?
Um, That's a great question. I guess no. I guess I wasn't ready for it because I didn't face it when I was in statewide office before. You know, you got to remember I served 2 terms as a Republican back in the 2000s on our Public Utility Commission, an elected position, and never faced anything like this. But then again, the internet wasn't what it was today. Right? You know, we
Yeah.
didn't have I did not serve the first time during the time of Twitter. And then to see, I just try not to look at it anymore. My staff tells me don't look at it, but in fact yesterday it got so terrible that we turned off the comments. I mean, that's how bad yesterday was. In the last couple days in terms of the vitriol going on, just flying around all over the internet. So no, and you're right. It's something that I have to think about. I'm a single mom. So if something happens to me, there's nobody else for my daughter, really, except her aunt and her dad who lives on the other side of the country. But these are the kind of crazy kinds of things that, yeah, I guess I didn't really fully think through, but I don't think that I would do anything differently, Dana. I would have done it all over again, and yeah. That,
Yeah, but the problem I think is though, that's great, and of course, I applaud you for that. But there's a lot of people out there
I would
that
not
don't want
like
to take
us.
those that don't want to take
No.
those risks for their family members
Right.
and feel like it's not right for me to jeopardize my children's lives, or my
Yeah.
spouse's life or whoever. And now between the doxing and the swatting and the threats and all the rest of it, it's sort of just become part and parcel of holding public office. And it's not just for statewide electeds like us. I
Yeah.
see it all the way down at the local level. And that's why in 2019, I created what really was the first Attorney General office to have a standalone hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit where that's all they do all day, every day. And what has been really interesting is that it's not as though it's just Democrats that get threats. It's across the spectrum.
Right.
We just
Yeah.
as many Republicans get threats as Democrats, and just as many
Right.
people who hold nonpartisan offices like judges. And what we have seen is an incredible escalation in the number of threats to people who back in the day were pretty much insulated from threats, like judges, like prosecutors, like sheriffs. I
Yeah.
mean, what does it mean when you have a county sheriff that is getting death threats? I mean, that's not very smart. Let's just start with that.
You
But,
better, yeah. Not a
you
good
know,
idea.
but the fact is, like, we absolutely are seeing that on a regular basis. And I think it's because people feel just so footloose and fancy free about throwing threats out there, onto social media or in other spaces in a way that they didn't used to. And it starts at the top. No, create a number of threats has happened under Donald Trump. And it's because he doesn't mind threatening people. And so those who follow him or who subscribe to, uh, his action or his methods will find to do the same thing. And then on the opposite end, you have individuals who are like, well, if they're going to be threatening people, I guess it's okay if we do the same, which is not, it's not how things should work at all.
No, you're right. It does start at the top, and and everybody has to think this through and be more careful. And obviously Donald Trump did not do that. The president did not do that yesterday from the Oval Office, from his speech at the Oval Office where he blamed Democrats for this. That's insane. Um, you know, nobody, I don't remember anybody blaming, or I certainly didn't. I know you didn't blame Republicans for the assassination of the Minnesota Speaker of the House. That is not what you do. That is not, that is the opposite of what Spencer Cox did yesterday and today, the
Yeah,
governor of Utah, who said
yeah.
to
And
everyone, love one another. Go, you know what he said? He said, go feel some grass, which I thought was really great.
right,
Go
right.
outside,
Yeah,
get rid of your phone, take this thing and put it down and go love somebody, go hug your family member, have dinner with your family members. Apparently in Utah, there's a Democratic and a Republican group getting together to talk to each other. That seems great.
Yeah. And we know that the algorithms on social media platforms are designed to get you all riled up because they want to
Right.
keep you on that platform because that's how they monetize it with their ads is to keep you upset. And everybody here, I think, knows and appreciates, if you're our age at least, how Facebook changed over time. Used to
Yeah.
be it was just literally to see what your friends and family and former work associates that maybe you don't see so much anymore, what they were up to. And now it's not that at all. In fact, it's almost impossible to even see your friends, family, and work associates because more often than not, it's being what's suggested to you. And the things that are being suggested to you are the things designed to keep you on. And it might be things that make you really angry, or in my case, just an endless stream of cat videos. Which again, I don't know that that's so bad, but
Um,
also I should be doing other things besides
do
watching
you
cat.
even have a cat? I mean,
Do I
I
have
do.
a cat? I have
Uh,
4 cats,
you have four
Kris.
cats. Okay, well, that's why you have an endless stream of cat
That's
videos.
right. I am
You
the
know,
worst stereotype of a lesbian that there is out there. We have many cats, and I'm telling you, it's not going to get any better. Like as I age, I can just
you're gonna get
see,
more?
you
Are you
know,
gonna get more
throwing
cats?
caution to the wind. Yeah, well, we have a partnership with the Humane Society out here, and we handle some of their cases that they investigate, which are very sad, tragic abuse, neglect, cruelty cases about animals. But every time I go there, they have a new kitten there because they know I'm taking it home. And I will say this has almost caused a divorce in our family because I've brought home one kitty. But then I always say to my wife, if if I do that, you're going to have to explain to people that you divorced me because I brought home a really cute little kitten, and that's not going to go well for you. And
Well,
she
I
knows
don't
it.
know. A fifth, a sixth, I don't know. That might be. I don't know, Dana. I don't know.
Can you really ever have too many cats? I don't know.
I love them, but it's really my daughter who is the one always trying to bring home cats. She gets on this some cat shelter on feeds on Instagram, and then all of a sudden I'm faced with adopting another cat. But I have
Well,
resisted that.
you talked about the fact thing happened. You don't know what would happen to your daughter. I suggest you come live with me because you can have all the
Okay.
cats she
Well,
wants.
I'm gonna put you in my will. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes,
Okay.
that's all I'm asking. Is that so bad?
Michigan, it's a good state. From what I've learned from you, it's a good state. Last thing I will say,
It is a good
my
state.
feed, you have cats in your feed. I apparently like videos of planes landing. I don't know why,
Interesting.
but I like to watch planes landing at
I'm
airports.
so much, I'm so glad it's that and not planes crashing,
Well,
because that would
no,
be
yeah.
a weird kind of fetish for you to have that would
Yeah.
concern me, candidly. But so
No,
that's good.
mostly just landing and flying. I don't know,
Great.
but that's
Everything's
weird because
fine.
I don't fly. I've never tried to fly, but anyway.
Barb, thanks so much for joining us on our podcast. It's a real pleasure and honor to have you here, and also very timely for a million different reasons.
Yeah, sadly enough, events, I suppose, make our conversation very timely, but honored to be with you both. Wonderful champions of the law and democracy, and my honor to be with both of you.
Thanks,
And
Barb.
actually, Kris, I just texted Barb not too long ago because I was so deeply concerned. It was an article about just things that were happening at the DOJ. And the author of this article, I think it was a New York Times piece, if I'm not mistaken, said that normally they have no issue at all finding experts who used to work for the DOJ who will comment on something to say, if something is sort of not the protocols that they were used to when they worked there or how things usually happen or don't. They couldn't find any experts who would speak out about what was happening at J. Quaid was the only former U.S. attorney or former employee of the Justice Department that was willing to talk, and that was scary. But of course, it helped me to appreciate the fact that Barb has been unafraid to speak her mind for the many years she's been now removed from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. You know, I think one of the things that liberates me is I work as a professor. I enjoy academic freedom, and I can say what I really think. And so many people, I think, in this Trump administration are fearful of the consequences. So people in law firms don't want their firm to be targeted the way we saw earlier in this administration. People who work in-house at corporations as lawyers don't want to speak out. And so many DOJ alumni are worried that if they provide candid, negative commentary about what's happening out of the Department of Justice, the wrath will be turned toward them. You know, I'm lucky that I'm just not that big a deal, that I have the freedom to do that. But it is getting lonelier and lonelier, because what we've seen this term that's so different from the first term is these pillars of democracy, these institutions of power, like universities and law firms and the press, this time around are really trying to just keep their head down and go along with what the president says, or even worse, some of them are supporting him, giving him donations. You know, I think about the tech bros who showed up at the inauguration and gave, $1 million donations for the inaugural fund. They're not just not criticizing him, they're actually, feeding the flames of the Trump 2.0. And so it is a very different time we're living in.
Yeah, I hear you, Barb. Prior to becoming the AG here in Arizona, I was a professor at Arizona State University, both the law school and the School of Sustainability. So I hear you on that, the ability to speak more freely. But I also hear your frustration. I've been super frustrated, just as I'm a former Republican, so and I am a former newspaper reporter, and I covered several Republican campaigns for president. And I'm frustrated at the Republicans who
Yeah.
are out of office,
Mm-hmm.
like George W. Bush
Yeah.
and Dan Quayle, and frankly, to name names. And where are they? I mean, come on, the people who we need to be
Yeah.
speaking out, who really have no reason. I don't see any reason for those Republicans who are never going to run for office again to not be speaking out. But I don't know.
And the names you just named would have so much credibility in the Republican
Yes,
Party, because it's very easy to portray Democrats as, well, there goes the radical left again, just defending their own or whatever it is.
right.
But what is so damaging, I think, about this particular political moment is how divisive it is. The rhetoric after the shooting of Charlie Kirk has all been about, us versus them, the radical
Right.
left, and all this sort of stuff. And it would be wonderful for some of the names you've named to sort of, call for unity. I know some of them have, but to also say that it's just wrong to engage in this kind of divisive rhetoric, because it is damaging our ability as a country to move forward, to make progress. Trump is great at knocking things down, not so great at building things up. Maybe we're going to throw some immigrants out of the country, but what are we doing to improve the immigration system? Nothing. Tariffs are going to get imposed. And I guess, that makes us look like a tough guy on the world stage, but is it really going to help consumers or American businesses, right? So
No.
I think Republicans do have the voice where they could say those things, and I wish we could hear more of them.
I
Yeah,
just
and
want to
on
relay
go
again.
ahead, Dana. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just
No,
real quickly
finish
on
up.
the tariffs front, Barb. Good point. And another group that hasn't spoken out even about the tariffs, which we're leading a law co-leading a lawsuit, the Democratic AGs, against the tariffs, but the business community hasn't
Yeah.
spoken out even about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead, Dana.
No, I think they don't want to
Well, I
put a
wanted to
target
relay.
on their back.
So, candidly, after the election last November, not too long afterwards, I contacted Barb, and I was really concerned about some of the threats of vengeance that Trump had made during the course of the campaign. And he was very specific about some of, his enemies that he intended to go after using the Department of Justice. And what you said to me at that time, Barb, was that there were really too many protocols in place and too many layers of bureaucracy to allow that kind of thing to happen unless you actually had, just cause to pursue a particular individual for, a particular crime, particular set of facts that would have led you to believe that this person had engaged in criminal conduct, as opposed to, I want to go after you. Now let's find something, somewhere, anywhere that we can utilize to do that. And you assured me at the time that that couldn't possibly happen. But now we're in the situation where we see our colleague, Tish James from New York, who's being investigated, and very publicly, a statement made by, Pam Bondi that they'd be going after her. Senator Adam Schiff, who is been targeted, James Comey and John Bolton and many others. And I wonder now, looking back at our conversation that we had many months ago and what has unfolded in the interim, if you've changed your mind about that.
Oh, Dana, I was so young and naive way back then, just a few months ago. Those were months ago. I've grown so much since then. I am not as optimistic now as I was then. I still think that there are checks in place to prevent somebody from being convicted of a crime they did not commit. That includes the grand jury process, courts, the jury system, the right to counsel, and all of those kinds of things. But I am not as confident as I was then that someone won't find themselves under investigation on baseless grounds, or at least selective grounds. So, selective means, yeah, sure, maybe somebody did hypothetically commit mortgage fraud, but the only reason we found out about it is because we violated FBI protocols of requiring predication from an independent source before we just go on a fishing expedition to see if we can find some crime that maybe somebody committed and see what can stick. I'm especially troubled by Ed Martin. He was the nominee for U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., who did not have the votes. Stop the Steal believer, represented some of the defendants charged on January 6th. He now has the position of weaponization czar. He is running the weaponization working group. And one of the things he said upon taking that job was, he's also the pardon attorney, by the way, and he posted online when he became the pardon attorney, "No MAGA left behind." Wow. I mean, what does that say about someone who's supposed to be an independent actor at the Office of the Pardon Attorney, fairly and uniformly making recommendations to the president about who should get a pardon? No MAGA left behind. But that's the least of my worries. The most of my worries is that what he said in his capacity in this weaponization working group, and this is the one that is looking into Tish James and others, he said, I'm going to see my job as to name and shame people. So even if ultimately we don't have enough evidence to charge them, we can at least let the public know what they've been up to, because public shaming is so important. That is absolutely contrary to those protocols that I mentioned back then when we spoke, Dana. There are protocols that say cases, you can't go on a fishing expedition to start a case. You have to have independent evidence that a crime has been committed. It also says that you cannot use partisan politics in any making of any decision in any case. It says you may not engage in selective prosecution. That is, I'm only going to prosecute this group and not another group for engaging in the same kind of behavior. And the Justice Department neither confirms nor denies even the existence of an investigation until it speaks through an indictment. So everything about what I am seeing from Ed Martin and this weaponization working group flies in the face of all of those kinds of protocols I've talked about before. So although I don't think anyone's going to be convicted of a crime they did not commit, I think we are going to see this name and shame of, damaging people's reputations, even when there is not evidence of crime.
Barb, I'm curious to get your take on what this does, all of this, whether it's the weaponization working group or the firing of top FBI officials or FBI agents who worked on the J6 cases, which it seems obviously insane and totally inappropriate. And now there's this lawsuit, I think. I haven't had a chance to read it, from the FBI officials who were fired. or pushed out. What does it do to the folks who remain behind? I mean, what's going on inside DOJ and the FBI?
Yeah, I know from people who have left in recent times that the morale is very low because most of the people who take these jobs are not political actors.
Right.
They take these jobs because they want to serve the public. They take great satisfaction in that. They make case decisions based on fact and law. And now they see actors like, Kash Patel and Pam Bondi making statements that are just contrary to DOJ policy that are politicized. And so I think the morale is very low. They've seen a huge shift in enforcement priorities away from public corruption and white collar crime and in favor of immigration offenses. I
Right.
think there are many lawyers who would say, are we really making our country a safer place by engaging in this zero tolerance immigration enforcement where we're, picking up grandmas and parents dropping their kids off at school? When I served as U.S. attorney, we brought many immigration enforcement cases, but we prioritized based on people who are in the country who posed a threat to national security or public safety. There was a prioritized list of who was sought every day for removal. And they've abandoned that list in an effort of quantity over quality and just, going to the Home Depot parking lot to pick up anybody they can and then prosecuting those. So I don't have a problem with the prosecution of people who've committed crimes and are even unlawfully in our country. But I think what doesn't get recognized is the resource allocation. It
Right.
means other cases are not being prosecuted. So if you're just going after the low-hanging fruit, and I don't mean to disparage people and by comparing them to fruit, but the easy cases, I'm just going to, patrol around and pick up people now who look black, who look brown, who speak Spanish. Supreme Court says that's okay for now. Um, Instead of taking the time it takes to go after serious threats to our safety or the integrity of our government systems. We worked on public corruption cases that took more than a year to put together, but well worth it, I think, to clean out City Hall when we had, a corrupt mayor and, when you've got corrupt city council members who are, stealing millions from the public trough. In the same way, violent crime. There are some very serious violent crimes because of the dedication of resources to immigration cases. It means some of those cases aren't going to be prosecuted. Just to put a number on it, when I served as U.S. attorney, we averaged about 1,000 cases a year. That's about what our capacity was. Little up, little down. That's about what we were able to do. If now suddenly 25% of those cases are immigration cases, something's got to give. And we know that the Trump administration has disbanded corruption working groups, cryptocurrency investigations, public corruption
Right.
investigations, foreign influence task forces. So that's the stuff that's not being done just so that we can prosecute, grandma who overstayed her visa.
Yeah. I mean, and just to tell some of our listeners that are not Michigan area listeners, I mean, one of the cases, obviously, that you prosecuted, Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, who received, I believe, a 28-year sentence and literally had his sentence commuted in exchange for him campaigning for Donald Trump in the 2024 election. I mean, he said it himself. And I just can't imagine like how that feels to your prosecutors who worked so hard on those cases and all the investigators that years of their life on a matter like that, just to know that that quid pro quo exists. And all you have to do is pay the president enough money in terms of contributions or make promises like Eric Adams did about, immigration related issues. And then all of a sudden your case doesn't exist anymore. It's been dropped. Or charges have been, have been dismissed, or you've received a commutation or a pardon.
Yeah, as a prosecutor, I try not to take any decision personally. We did our job, we did it well, and we let the chips fall where they may. But I agree with you that I had a problem with some of the things that President Trump did. One is he commuted the sentence of Kwame Kilpatrick after serving 7 years, but he did not commute the sentence of his co-defendant, Bobby Ferguson, who was sentenced to 21 years. So his conduct was slightly less egregious than that of Kwame Kilpatrick, and yet he didn't get any commutation because he wasn't the big name and he wasn't out there, doing. Now, I agree. You said it certainly appears like there's a quid pro quo that he was campaigning for President Trump. I don't know if there was ever a demand or an exchange or an agreement to that, but he did campaign for President Trump. He showed up at a rally. So it kind of looks like that, doesn't it? And in a swing state like Michigan, where if the former mayor is going to campaign for you, that probably counts for something. The other thing about that I found troubling is Kwame Kilpatrick was not the only politician convicted of public corruption that got pardons and commutations from Donald Trump. There were other members of Congress from around the country, even Rod Blagojevich, who you may recall sold Barack Obama's Senate seat when he became president to the highest bidder. And I think part of that is an effort to normalize public corruption, that these aren't real crimes. Real crimes are committed by minorities on the streets. These are white guys. And this is just hardball politics, business as usual. And no one should go to prison for that. Well, why does Donald Trump want to normalize that? Perhaps it's because he himself wants to engage in that kind of behavior and convince the rest of us that that's just the way politics are done. So that's the other reason that case concerns me, and that trend concerns me.
So, Barbara, I'm wondering, Dana and I were talking before you came on about it's sort of, I think, the corollary for what you were talking about with regard to prosecutors diverting their time to these immigration cases. Out here in Arizona, we have seen we just dealt with a situation in which 60 DEA agents were redeployed away from Arizona to Washington DC. We're the fentanyl funnel for the rest of the state. We're on the front lines of the fentanyl crisis. I'm trying to fight the Mexican drug cartels with the DEA. I had asked Pam Bondi for 50 more agents, and she took 60 of my agents away to go patrol Foggy Bottom for immigration and, I don't know, picking up trash or whatever they're making them do. I guess I'm interested in your take in someday this will all be over. And how do we put all the pieces back together at DOJ or in these agencies where all of this bad stuff has happened? I mean,
it's a great question, and I think there's no easy answer to it. This diverting of resources, I think, to make this sort of short-term show of power, right? Look at us, we're doing something about this. And, as we said, what people don't see is what is now not happening. For you, addressing the fentanyl crisis, that is one that is taking lives. That is a real crisis. Or I know in California, when National Guard troops got called up in Los Angeles to respond to protests over immigration enforcement, what Governor Gavin Newsom said is these National Guardsmen would otherwise be working on fighting wildfires in our state.
Right.
So they're raging. Meanwhile, we've got all these guards standing around in Los Angeles. I think that if President Trump were really interested in reducing violent crime in Washington, D.C., he wouldn't be putting troops on the streets. He'd be doing other things that can really make a difference in violent crime reduction. For one, they're not in neighborhoods where the crime is occurring. They're in front of, the Washington Monument where all the tourists can see them. It's all about show. It isn't about effectiveness. Similarly, what the data shows is that prevention programs are a critical part of addressing the root causes of crime. And instead, they just want to arrest and prosecute, and look tough. It's never going to stop the flow of crime if you don't address the root causes. So how do we get back to normalcy? I think it's going to be very difficult because one thing I worry about is as many good people have left these jobs in the federal government, and I'm aware of many who've left DOJ or the FBI or other places, either through retirement or termination or whatever it is, they've been replaced by other people. And I don't know who these people are, so I don't want to disparage them. But I do know that one of the requirements for hiring is that people answer a series of questions, including which of President Trump's executive orders are you most interested in executing, and tell us how you will be doing that. What are they picking? Flag burning, Alien Enemies Act. So I worry that the people they're hiring are people who are, on board with this political Justice Department. And how do you get rid of them? Because if you follow the Merit System Protection Board rules, they get to stay unless they've committed, some just cause for their termination. So they're going to be what's referred to as burrowed in. And I worry about whether they are going to support and defend the Constitution as they swore to do. But, I know there will be a temptation, I think, to fight fire with fire and to terminate all those people if they got hired during the Trump administration. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think you have to, if you want to return to normalcy, you have to return to normalcy. And that means all of those post-Watergate norms that I mentioned earlier with Dana, I think it means enforcing all of those things. Maybe we codify some of those things. Maybe they become, if not statutes, part of the federal regulations, so they can't be changed with a stroke of a pen. There has to actually be the notice and comment period before you can change them. Because in addition to DOJ, which has all of these rules, FBI has something called its Domestic Investigations Operations Guide, shortened to the acronym DIOG, and it has all kinds of protections for civil liberties and initiating investigations so that people aren't just caught up in a fishing expedition in retaliation for exercising constitutional rights. But now it's just policy. If somebody violates the policy, there may be internal discipline, but nothing else. And so maybe putting some teeth into those things is the way to make sure people stay on the up and up. I think the other thing we really need, that we're really in trouble for at the moment, is a Congress that is vigorous. We've seen Republicans and Democrats, some are out there leading the charge, but too many, I think, are just following the political winds, and they say, oh no, Donald Trump's kind of popular. Maybe I ought to keep my mouth shut and not criticize him so much. Our Constitution is written in the idea of separation of powers, that there'll be vigorous oversight by Congress, and maybe impeachment if a president overreaches with his power. But like the chance of that happening right now seems slim to none. But we've got 2026 midterm elections coming up. If we could get people in office who are, whether Republican or Democrat, just people who are willing to hold a president accountable and not intrude on powers of Congress, right? Like the power to tariff is a power of Congress, impounding appropriated funds from Congress, rubber stamping his nominees like Kash Patel and RFK Jr. Like, come on, Congress, get a backbone.
Well, the AGs will definitely agree with you on that
Yeah.
point. We've brought pretty much all of our lawsuits are brought on under that premise. So here to that.
Absolutely. And I love, by the way, Barb, that you're such a fast talker, because we don't have much time left, but I have so many things to ask you about. If I can ask about two different subject matters at the same time and get your response. One has to do with, your university and my alma mater, and the fact that Pam Bondi and the DOJ have been issuing subpoenas in regard to things related to gender-affirming care for trans youth, and U of M, and then today Corewell Health, another major healthcare provider, just capitulating and saying we're not going to provide this type of healthcare anymore, just because we don't want to have to answer to DOJ, even though there's no crime that they're investigating, and there is not just that there's no law that prohibits that. In Michigan, we actually have a Civil Rights Act that demands that gender identity is a protected class. So I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about that. I know it's hard because you work for U of M, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. And the second thing that I wanted to ask you about, unrelated, is we're in the midst, of course, of the Charlie Kirk assassination having just occurred. And I can't help but notice that most of the major announcements don't come from the FBI, but they come from Donald Trump himself. He is the one announcing that Kirk, passed, and that he's actually had died from his injuries. He was the one who announced when a suspect was apprehended. And I find it to be very unusual for those statements to be coming from the White House instead of from the FBI. So I'd like to get your thoughts on both of those things.
Yeah, happy to talk about both of them. So this capitulation on gender-affirming care is really disturbing. First, let me make it clear, I don't speak for the University of Michigan. They have leaders who decide these things. But just, little old me, in my view, it reminds me a whole lot of, it's become almost a cliche now, but Timothy Snyder, the historian, wrote this great little book called On Tyranny. And one of his 20 principles for fighting tyranny is don't obey in advance. And I remember reading that a few years ago when it first came out and thinking, I don't really know what this means, but that people will start, even before they have to, will start capitulating for fear that the consequences might get grave. And so they want to hide. They're a turtle, retreating into their shell. Don't look at me over here. Go somewhere else. I'm no trouble for me. You won't get any trouble from me. And that's what we're seeing. We also saw it with the University of Michigan with DEI. Until last year, the University of Michigan had 6 core values, and 3 of them were diversity, equity, and inclusion. Even before the Trump administration said, you can't, we're looking at you, gone, like just got rid of them. So I think that kind of blind obedience in advance is likely what good lawyers advise their clients to do. And good lawyers should advise their clients that way. But you know what a leader does? A leader says, thank you for that information. I'm glad to make an informed choice. And we are going to continue to be the leaders and best, and we're going to do what we think is right. So I fault the leaders, not the lawyers. On the second question about the Charlie Kirk, I agree with you, Dana. And one of these other big post-Watergate reforms was to separate the White House from the Justice Department and make it clear that the Justice Department acts independently. From time to time, it may be necessary for the Attorney General to give the president a heads up. We're going to unseal an arrest warrant and an indictment against a head of state, and this might affect foreign policy or diplomacy. Good. Thanks for the heads up. But in terms of running an investigation, that is the Justice Department. And I find it deeply troubling that the president is the one, as you say, making these announcements. And I also find it troubling that the president isn't just making announcements, but he's exploiting this tragedy. We had J.D. Vance accompanying the casket to Arizona. It is all about division. And President Trump has said something like, we will fight like hell to beat back these radical leftists who did this. Like one guy did this, one unhinged person did this. We should be talking about the root causes that are causing mass shootings in the United States and targeted shootings in the United States, and use it as a moment of unity and not division. And so I think that is, one of the many ways in which Donald Trump is sabotaging America.
Yeah, Dana and I were talking about that a little bit earlier too, Barb, and contrasting Donald Trump's initial reactions, which it's hard to imagine any president ever in the history of America responding that way to a shooting like this, to an assassination like this, to what Spencer Cox, the Utah governor, said.
Yep.
Right, which was to try to cool things down, lower the temperature. He said, let's go love each other. Let's understand we're all Americans. Let's go feel the grass. Let's go feel grass. Put your phone down, because the algorithms are trying to divide us. But I think you make
it's a good point. I'll just end by saying this. I can remember being in a law enforcement meeting and someone saying, in discussing a shooting incident that caused concern in the community, and a law enforcement officer saying, a police chief, effective leaders bring calm to chaos. And I think that's so true. And what we are seeing from the Trump administration is just the opposite. It's all about, escalating, getting people up in arms, getting people angry, and exploiting that for political reasons.
Yep. Well, I think that is a great note to probably end on, which is we all need to do our part to bring calm to chaos. And we're living through pretty chaotic times. I didn't live through the 1960s. I was born in 1971, but this is starting to feel, I think, a lot like the 1960s. So we did get through that.
Well, having been born in 1969, oh my God, my memories of that 8 months that I was alive, still they sit with me in a way that my memories just come pouring back. No, I mean, these are times that obviously the historians will write about and probably try to psychoanalyze for a very long time. But Barb, just want to thank you for all your tremendous work and how outspoken you've been and unafraid at all times. And we need more people like yourself that are out there who will speak truth to power at all times.
Well, thank you both, and back at you, because I think one of the silver linings of the past year has been courts and lawsuits and the attorneys general who have brought some of those successful lawsuits. So thank you both for your work.
Thanks, Barb. Well, folks, that is all we have for this week's episode of Pantsuits and Lawsuits.
And we'll be back soon with even more captivating conversations and insightful interviews about the ever-changing American legal landscape.
So until then, don't forget to check us out wherever you get your social media, whether that's YouTube or Instagram, wherever you get your social media. Check us out, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.